Hey guys, in this video today we discuss what it takes to become a Royal Marines Commando. So right now, to get into Royal Marines recruit training, there's a big process that takes place. You have your interview, medical, then you do something called a pre-joining fitness test, then you'll do a CPC, which is 3 days down at Lympstone. If you're successful with them, you'll get put onto a ROP, an ROP, recruit orientation phase, and that's 4 weeks at Lympstone. And if you're successful on that, you'll go into recruit training, which is 32 weeks. So you'll spend a total of 36 weeks at Lympstone getting ready and becoming a Royal Marines Commando. This is the longest and most arduous basic training in the entire world, and the Royal Marines pride themselves on that. There's an area of mystique around Royal Marines training. So there's some documentaries that have happened. They've been on TV, they're on YouTube, but they don't tell the full story. They're very much used as a bit of a recruitment drive. So I want to share a little bit more about what it takes to get into the Royal Marines and just how far you have to dig in. So my story is when I joined Lympstone Royal Marines training, I was about 70 kilos, and after 3 months I was 81 kilos. So I joined and I was boxing a lot. I was training maybe 6 times a week, sometimes twice a day for my boxing. Loads of circuits, loads of hill sprints, loads of interval work. And I was pretty fit when it comes to, the average civvy. The Royal Marines opened my eyes as to how much the body can take and how much suffering you have to go through to become elite at anything. So I was at a football club before this, and to be honest, looking back, if I had my mindset now, I probably would have gone a lot further with the football. But I never really knew what it took to become elite at anything. Royal Marines training opened your eyes just as to how much you can take. If you don't quit and you've got a strong enough mind, your body can go through an awful lot. Recruit training is a constant cycle of sieving out people who aren't suitable for high stress, high intensity operations around the world. So the Royal Marines are an elite fighting force within the UK military. And so they'll be involved in very high pressured, high intense operations that are very much life and death. And so it's so important that they have the right people for those situations. If you have someone who hasn't been pushed to their absolute limits and overcome it, when they get put in that environment, they're so easy to welt. So it's so important that recruit training is massively high pressured, and also almost recreating as much as humanly possible high intensity operations. The hardest thing I found about recruit training was just the longevity, the constant being under the microscope, the constant pressure on you to perform, to never put a foot wrong. Even things like if you have a loose Irish pennant in your clothes, it gets caught, you're getting thrashed for it, or if one of your pockets is undone, just the constant microscopic view on you as a recruit. Bearing in mind as well, you're learning an unbelievable amount of skills in a high pressured environment with military bearing. It massively weighs down on you, and you're doing all this with minimal sleep, the huge amounts of fatigue from the training, and you're expected to excel. So it's no good hitting the minimum required standards of fitness and military knowledge and all these things. No, you're expected to excel. So it's no wonder that most troops start with about 60 people and averagely pass out with 10 to 15 lads. And bearing in mind, there's a massive joining process to even get to Lympstone, and then they're ending with that many people. It just shows you how intense it is. So a lot of these documentaries can't really portray that. It's very hard to portray that, very hard to show the real nitty gritty, the day after day after day. One of the hardest things I think as a recruit is, like, say you're in week 12, for instance, so you've done 3 months already, and then to think, oh my word, I've still got another 20 weeks left of this, and the more arduous stuff is coming. That really weighs you down as a recruit. So it's very much about focusing on the there and now, and just focusing on 1 day at a time, 1 hour at a time, rather than going, right, in 3 weeks' time I'm going to be at week 20 or whatever it is. And this is really what you'll find is, by the end of training, Nothing really phases you. No punishments really faze you. No task is almost too much for you. Whereas at the start, you're very fragile and you're worrying about like, oh, what's coming up in this exercise, or what's happening tomorrow. I heard next week's a really hard week. By the end, you're like, you just don't care. And that's where you start seeing those subtle changes in your mindset. The interesting thing is that you might not necessarily see it at that point because you're surrounded with people who are going through that same sort of process as you. And so you don't really think you've changed much. And the only time you really notice the changes within you is where you go back to your civvy life and the friends you were with before, you no longer really relate to them as much. You're bored when you get home. You're a bit strange around the family. Family think you're a bit weird and all that. And that's where you really start seeing the changes within you. So what does it take? Of course, it takes a massive amount of physical fitness. That's just an absolute given. That's almost like, that's just the low rung of the ladder, so to speak. Like, of course, you've got to be fit to be an elite soldier. It takes so much more than that. I think the biggest thing it takes is resilience. Resilience is absolutely massive in your pursuit to become a Royal Marines Commando. And it's something that is massively lacking in Civvy Street. The culture these days is very much like, it's all about you. You do you as long as you're happy. Get a nice car, get a nice house, get a nice easy life, easy job, couple of holidays every year, low working hours, high income, happy days. Royal Marines is not like that. So if that's the sort of life you want, mug it off. It is very much, the pay isn't great, to be honest, but what it can set you up for in the future is enormous. Working conditions are very, very hard. Find yourself in places that you'd never dream of. But what it gives you is so much more than a big paycheck or a nice house or a nice car. It gives you the confidence that you can deal with any situation you ever get into in any environment in the world. And that is something that money cannot buy. A little anecdote, when I came out of the Marines, sort of struggled to adapt to Civvy Street, had a couple of jobs here and there. I had my wife and my first daughter. I was probably earning 900 quid a month labouring while I was trying to find my way in Civvy Street. My rent alone was 600. And there was enormous pressure on me to provide for my family and all this. And do you know what? I think it would have maybe become too much for me if I hadn't already gone through really arduous times within the Royal Marines, really arduous environments and ops and all that. And I was able to manoeuvre out of that and create a better life for my family and create a business that has gone on to do pretty well. And I can only thank the Royal Marines for that, for giving me that mindset of never ever quitting, being resilient. When all the pressure's on me, piling on me, I was able to hold my resolve, push through and create a better sort of future for my family. It takes courage, it takes determination, it takes humility, it takes sacrifice, and it takes cheerfulness in the face of adversity. These are things that cannot be bought. These are things that you have to go through arduous times to receive and to be able to take into your everyday life. And the Royal Marines provides that. And these are the things that it takes to become a Royal Marines Commando. It's so much more than having a fast 1.5 mile time or being able to put a Bergen on your back and yomp for 30 miles. It's so much more than that. It's the day after day striding for excellence, being able to survive and perform in a pressurised environment, having your oppos back, being aware of the needs of others around you, and identifying weak links within the team that you need to build up, identifying weak areas in your life that you need to build up and improve on, identifying strengths in others, strengths in yourselves for a common goal and a common cause. It's so much more than just being physically fit. It all comes down to how much you want it. I remember one of my close oppos who was a bit of a mentor for me, went on to be Special Forces. He always used to go to me, Sam, how much do you want it? How much do you want it? And that question really helped me in some of my darkest times. And the answer for a lot of people is not enough. For others, it's more than anything. And that is what will get you through Royal Marines training.